Let's try and create a pocket for the advent calendar. We have our block which has been trimmed, and now we need to make a pocket bag to go on the back. Let's find a piece of fabric which is wide enough and fold it in half so as there's the fold at the lower edge. I'm just straightening out this piece of fabric to make sure that we have a nice straight seam, and I've got a selvage on the edge there, and I like to trim my selvage off, but it's going to be a bit tight with this block. So I measured my block so I know exactly how wide it's going to be. So I'm creating a square to match the block. I think it was 4 3/4 rather than 5. So there's our block on top of our little pocket. Let's turn our pocket through and show you how that will sit. So there's a little pocket bag opening there, so we need to attach it to the top of the block. Let's just crease a fold at the bottom temporarily, because it won't be the actual fold. Put the block on top. Let's turn this over. So that fold will sit above that stitching line when the block is complete. So let's join the top of the block to one edge of the shorter edge of the pocket bag. Make sure you know which is the top and bottom. I've chosen numbers 9, but it could have been number 6. I had to go and check. So let's just pin this into position so it's the right length. And we will then stitch just inside the perimeter of the seam allowance there, which is will be a generous 1/2 inch. So it's got, the video's gone a little bit fuzzy because the camera's catching a hold of my watch instead of watching the foot, so excuse that. Sorry, you're not missing really anything. I'm just stitching inside that line. So once complete, let's open that out and let all the seam allowances sit in one direction. So they'll be sitting away from the block, they'll be sitting towards the pocket bag. Just finger press this, and then we're going to turn this and understitch it. So understitching is stitching through all layers 2 millimeters in from the sewn edge, or a shy 1/8 of an inch from the sewn edge. And what that does is keeps the colour on the back of the pocket when the pocket is pressed. So when you turn that seam over, it rolls the colour backwards, so it stops you from seeing it on the edge of a seam. That's what it's called, understitching rather than edge stitching. It's holding the lining under. So I should be going to the iron and pressing this, but I'm just going to use some clips instead. So let's just clip this folded seam into position. Clips are wonderful. Let's just move that along a bit. So it's laying itself onto position, and then we're going to create a fold that is going to be sitting above that seam allowance. So it sits above the seam allowance by about 1/8 of an inch, 2 mils. And let's just put a pin on that fold from the seam allowance. And we're just going to stitch inside the seam allowance. So needle to the right side of the stitching that's around the perimeter of the block. So this is just going to be a stay stitch or a holding stitch, so as the block is all together, ready for us to actually stitch and create our wall hanging. It's not doing anything other than holding the pocket bag to the back of the block or the back of the panel. Now it looks like I'm stitching on top of the stitching. I'm not. I'm stitching just to the right hand side of that row of stitching. Let's take our little clips out. There's our pocket formed, so we just need to go to the iron and press this off. Let's just press that under, just give it a little bit of a shot of steam. Press this nice and flat. Press the back. The idea is that we don't see any colour along that top seam. Now let's just trim the block up so as it makes our square measurement that we did originally, which was 4 3/4. That's my measurement, not yours. Your measurement can be whatever your block is finished at. And that will give us a generous 1/2 inch seam. There we go. So there's our pocket finished, ready to be put together with all the other ones to create a wall hanging to surprise the little ones with little gifts.